Welcome to the Marketing for the Culture podcast, powered by the African American Marketing Association. Each week, we'll bring you an insightful conversation from some of the best experts in our industry on how to advance our career. Join the collective of Black marketers across the world, advancing their brand as we work towards creating a collaborative community. Hey, good people. Welcome to the Marketing for the Culture podcast. I am your host, Michelle Gomez, back with my good friend and Henry Adaso. And I believe this is your second time on the show.
Second time on the show. I'm practically a veteran now. Thanks for having me back.
Yes. And then you're supporting the brand, Do It for the Culture, our podcast t-shirts. I love it. You have a new book out, The Art of Messaging. Okay. At this point, you're just a full-time professional expert author.
I don't know about that. I know that I drink a lot of coffee and I write a lot of words, and sometimes some of them turn out to be useful enough for a book.
I love it. Well, I have to ask, so your new book is The Art of Messaging. What was the motivation behind this book?
I saw a stat a few years ago, and it stopped me in my tracks. It basically, in the 70s and 80s, the average U.S. adult saw about 400 to 500 messages per day. Today, we see anywhere between 5,000 and 10,000 messages per day. So there's a lot coming at us, a lot of noise, a lot of information, and it's becoming very difficult to compete. I would argue that we're now in the noisiest marketing environment of our generation. So I started looking around to see how many messages I could see in a day, and it was overwhelming. But what I noticed is that there are so many messages that are just not clear. You see a billboard and you're not sure what they're selling. You see signage and you're wondering, what the offer is and who it's for. And I wanted to essentially codify some of the best practices that I also observed that helped some of the best brands create messages that stand out, messages that we remember, messages that drive people to action. And so I wanted to take all of those examples, the learnings, the principles, and kind of put that into a practical, no fluff guide for marketers and entrepreneurs.
So I have to ask, because obviously you're a marketer and you're a writer. So doing this experiment on yourself of trying to count the number of messages in one day, was this your off day? I can only imagine, were you including being at home? Did you go out that day? That's a lot of stuff to even consider the effort.
Yeah, it was over the course of a week, and I would try to bake it into my normal daily routine, because I didn't want to deliberately just drive around for a full day looking for messages. So I wondered, if I'm just driving to work, as you said, I go to work, I'm an author, and if I get up in the morning and I pour my coffee and then I do my early morning writing and I get ready to go to work, come back, run errands, etc., how many messages am I seeing, right? And so what you notice is, the cereal box has a message on the back of it. The coffee, if you drink coffee like me, the coffee brand has a message on it. You turn on the TV, there are messages all over the place, commercials, messages in between. And then you get in your car, and before you leave your neighborhood, there's a signage somewhere. Driving out of your neighborhood, there are messages, political messages, commercial messages. Then you start to see billboards on the highway. On the elevator up to work, there are messages inside of the elevator. So there's just a lot coming at us every single day. And I think it makes it very difficult to earn attention, because as we are exposed to more messages, our noise filters go up. So we start to ignore the messages and they start to become white noise, and it makes it more difficult for marketers to truly stand out. It was fascinating, but also very, very overwhelming.
That is a good point. And I think even when you're not trying, you're just flooded with that information. And I think when you're a marketer and when you work in this space, you tend to raise the eyebrow a little bit more than other people because it's like I see it, but now I'm going to critique it. All these things. Okay. So,
Yeah, I'm constantly editing billboards on my way to work.
okay, you're editing the messaging. I'm probably editing the design. I'm like, that's a little cluttered and driving by in 3 seconds. I can't see all of that, let alone make a phone call. But
it's hard to turn it off.
It is. It is. But I do love a good billboard. Fun fact, I've realized in the city of Houston, there's no digital billboards.
Not even a single digital billboard. I've seen some digital display, not a billboard. I think you're right, but there's a drive-through somewhere off of 59 and I think Kirby. And on one of the buildings, they have a digital display, but you have to kind of drive through like a Chick-fil-A to then see it.
Yeah.
But it's on the side of a building. So yeah, I haven't seen a digital billboard either, but we're long due for one, I think.
All right. Obviously, we're geeking out over here.
Yeah, we're just marketing nerds.
All right. So you mentioned early on, there's a lot of great companies. We love these companies. We're probably even loyal to these companies. But every now and then they'll hit a snag and they have bad messaging. How does that happen? And can you give us an example of a company?
Yeah, sure. So we all love messages like think differently. Apple, we love Nike, just do it. And everybody knows what Walmart's mantra is, save money, live better. The reason these are memorable is because they are bold, they are empathic, they speak to a core emotional need, whether it's the need to be different or the need to be able to save money and live better. They're also specific. They speak to a certain kind of mindset or a certain kind of person, the person who wants to be an athlete or wants to compete, or the person who wants to save money. So these are all different psychographic elements. And then the final reason is they're transformative because there's a promise at the end of that message. So to me, those are the attributes of good, great, remarkable messages that we remember. Now, the bad messages are the opposite of that. So they tend to be filled with jargonese. And in the book, I cite an example of two people hanging out at a mixer event, and one person says that they're working on synergistic neural algorithms, and immediately you lose your audience. And the other person says, my company turns food waste into money. And instantly, that's who you want to go have a drink with, right? Because you want to learn more about how all of that happens. So unfortunately, you can have a very good product and a very good service, and it can be derailed by bad messaging if you don't communicate the benefits of that product or service effectively. And so what this book tries to do is to show you what the attributes are of great messaging so you can refine your existing messaging and resonate with your audience.
So can you go over those 7 principles?
Sure. So the first principle of a remarkable message is to focus on an audience of one. Every single principle in the book is accompanied by a black and white illustration. And the illustration for this one kind of tells a story. It's like a light, just a spotlight on a single chair. And the idea is that you picture one person who represents your whole audience and you hold them in your mind's frame as you create your message. The second principle is to find the beauty hidden in your brand. So every industry, every brand, no matter how boring you think it is, there's something special about your brand, and we have to harness that and highlight it. It could be a story of how it was founded. It could be something related to the special sauce in your product, but there's beauty hidden in your brand. The third principle is to give your message a style. Messaging isn't just about words on a billboard or words on a paper. There's style to it. So you might start by asking a question, or you might start by telling a story. Those are all different stylistic choices that you can make to communicate effectively. Principle number 4 is to create a source of cohesion. So that means you have a single dedicated source of all of your messaging. If you work for an organization or you work on the agency side, you can create messaging documents, what I call a messaging menu, that every customer touch point uses so that you're being consistent in the marketplace. Consistency is credibility. So the more consistent your messaging, the more credible you are, and it's clear to the market what you have to offer. Principle number 5 is to map your message to your audience. I have a very good friend who's a vegetarian. I could never convince him to eat steak. It doesn't matter how delicious the steak is, because that's just not relevant for him. So we know not to serve steak to vegetarians, and we have to do the same with our content and not serve the right content to the wrong people. So content has to be mapped to the audience based on what they're looking for, what they're interested in, and what kind of language speaks to them. Principle number 6 is to tune your message to your marketing channel. So similar to the idea of mapping to the audience, you also want to map it to the channel. So we were joking about billboards earlier. One of the powerful things about billboards is that they can communicate a message to you in a very brief and clear manner. So great billboards they're brief, they're clear. The writing is legible because people are driving. They have to be able to read it. But that's not the same thing that you want to necessarily do for, let's say, an audio message, right? That becomes more about helping the listener visualize what you're saying. So depending on your channel, there are different best practices that I propose in the book, and you have to tune your message to that channel to be effective. The final principle number 7, is to test and refine your messaging. What works today will not work tomorrow. So the driving question here is my messaging still working? Does it still resonate with the audience? Or have I been left behind by the time? So you constantly have to evaluate your messaging to make sure that it still resonates. There's a quote, one of my favorite quotes in the book, and it says that people change all the time and forget to tell other people. So messaging has to change as people change as well.
That's good. That's thinking about myself. I change a lot, and maybe I should make some announcements. Okay.
Yeah, maybe we should get a memo.
That's good. Okay, so I want to go back a little bit. Thank you for sharing that. If I'm not and please correct me if I'm wrong, but you mentioned with the messaging, some of the best messaging, some of the companies with the best messaging have a promise.
Yes, correct.
Can we distinguish between aspiration and a promise?
Absolutely. So aspiration is where you hope to be, what you want your brand to be. A promise is something that you can deliver on. So this isn't about promising something that you can't do. I think, that one of the most important steps in marketing is to make sure that your product actually works. No matter how good your messaging is, if the product doesn't work, you will be found out. And people will probably return the product. So there's a difference between manipulation and messaging with empathy. Manipulation is selling something that doesn't work, which often leads to regret, which often leads to returns. And messaging with empathy is meeting the customer where they are. And so yes, I think we have to be clear about what is aspirational and what is a brand promise that we can actually deliver on.
That's interesting because like some of the companies I'm thinking about is Nike Just Do It, right? It's simple. And obviously they've been a leader in so many areas, but I guess I'm probably thinking more about their videos and not just a slogan, not just a message. And that's probably why I'm getting the more aspirational vibes versus maybe Geico 15 minutes can save you 15%, right? And I think that's a good way to will people in.
Yeah, absolutely. And just do it is a hook. There are, as you rightly stated, there are so many other types of marketing materials and campaigns that orbit around the hook. And all of them have one goal, which is to inspire you to be your best self, to inspire you to, try to be as great as those athletes that we all look up to. And there's a lot of parallel between sports and life, and I find myself, for one, constantly drawing lessons from sports. And I think Nike speaks to that mentality of that person who wants to reach greatness in their own world, in their own terms, just like those athletes that we all love and adore. So I do think it's a very, very inspirational brand in that sense. And the Just Do It tagline is merely a hook. And then everything else that orbits around it is really what their marketing is all about.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. So moving into, I guess, the aspect of cohesion, one thing I love asking our guests on the show is marketing is very broad. There's a lot of moving parts. I guess, how can you get a marketing team on board? I'm thinking about, obviously, all of the writers and strategists and designers, and anything else that fills up the team roles as well. So any tips on creating and supporting a marketing team?
My best advice for creating consistency and cohesion within a marketing organization is to have a documented messaging strategy that everybody has access to. I call it a messaging menu. And what a messaging menu is similar to a menu that you'll get from a restaurant. It has your starter messages, it has your small plate messages, and your entree messages. The starters are the elevator pitches that you deliver when you run into someone at a mixer or an elevator. And the small plates are things like your social media posts. They're short enough to start to advance the conversation, but it doesn't give you the full presentation. And then your entrees are going to be full presentations. So if you're giving a 10-minute presentation on your product or service, or if you wanted to write a short blog post, those would be your entree messages, and those allow you to expound on your capabilities. I think if you document your messaging and share that with every touch point, your creatives, your content writers, your sales folks, your customer experience people, if everybody is using the same messaging, eventually the market starts to understand what it is you stand for, and they'll come to you for that solution that you stand for. It creates clarity, it creates consistency, and it creates credibility.
Wow, that's my first time hearing that. I think that's a very valuable tip. I know that's something I need to incorporate for myself. So thank you. I guess an extension to that, what is the best way to utilize your book? Obviously, people are going to read, but I also feel like you write what I consider practical business study books. Like, it doesn't belong on the shelf, it belongs on the right side of your desk. So it can be referenced during your strategy sessions.
Yes. I write short books, and they're easy to read, but they also include very practical steps that you can take to apply the principles. Because everything I write is based on experience, things that I've practiced and tried. And I've provided in this book, at the end of every chapter, I've provided exercises that people can do that will allow them to immediately implement the ideas that they're learning in the book. So they're case studies, examples, principles, very practical principles, and then there are exercises that you can immediately implement. And I think that's the best way to use the book, is to just work with it as you go. Like you said, they're short books, but they belong on the right side of your desk because there's work to do. There's homework. There's always homework. So they're not books that you can read and then put away. So that's the best advice I have. I remember when I started writing this book, I said to myself, if I put myself in the shoes of someone who is developing a new message for my brand, I don't want to read a big book, right? I want to get what I need and get back to work immediately. So I wrote this book with that mindset. It's about 130 pages. It's a very short and breezy read, but there are lots of practical advice contained as well.
Very cool. So I'm excited to state that if you are attending the Marketing for the Culture Summit and you purchase a VIP ticket, you are going to get a copy of The Art of Messaging. So once again, that's going out to all of our VIP attendees. And I just like to treat people well, pay it forward. And it was perfect timing. So thank you for that. Now, you will be moderating the Growth Marketing Strategies panel. Tell me, what are you most excited about, either as a moderator or just the event as a whole?
First of all, thank you for mentioning the book gifts to the VIPs. I'm really excited for everybody to check it out, and looking forward to the feedback on that. I'm thrilled to be moderating because that means I just get to sit back and soak in all of the wisdom that will be coming at me. You know, today I posted on LinkedIn about just kind of the value packed sessions that you've curated that people can look forward to. So I'm excited about learning. I'm going to bring a fresh notebook that I've never written in, because I know I'm going to walk away with lots and lots of jewels. So I'm just really excited to learn from everybody. There's a variety of speakers. There are people talking about how to use generative AI and minimize the risks. People talking about how to run more effective social media campaigns. People talking about, PR best practices, how to maximize brand visibility, build relationships with media. Whatever your interests are in marketing, it's covered. So I'm just really excited to learn as much as I can and then go home and quickly start implementing the ideas. Can't wait.
I'm sure you're going to be inspired and come out with another book by the end of the year.
It might be by the end of the day.
I appreciate it. Why don't you drop the names of your other books as well?
Yes, of course. So my first book is Content Mapping, and it's all about how to map your content to the different stages of the buying journey so that it can be more meaningful. And then my second book is called The Gap. That book is all about navigating the most difficult part of any creative or business journey, which is usually the middle part. In the beginning, we're all excited. And then when we get to the end, we're excited again. But the middle is really where it gets tricky, right? Because in the middle, we're battling things like fear and creative blocks and doubt and the lizard brain and what have you. So how do you get through that middle so you can be excited at the end? That's what The Gap is all about. And then my latest book, The Art of Messaging, is about how to create remarkable messages.
Yeah. And how can people find you?
Go to my website, henryadaso.com, and you can read my blog and sign up for my Freestyle Friday newsletter. And then the books are all available on Amazon.com.
I love it. Definitely have all of those links in our show notes so you can connect with Henry online and support all of his books because they're great. And thank you for being a guest on the Marketing for the Culture podcast.
Thank you for having me, Michelle. This was a blast.
Of course. All right, good people. Remember, I believe in you, and make sure you get those tickets to the summit. You can visit aa-ma.org. Thank you for listening to Marketing for the Culture podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe, whether it's on Apple, Google, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. And of course, our videos are on YouTube. If you have a moment, feel free to give us a rate, review, or just comment. We appreciate our sponsors for their continuous support. Also, if you're interested in learning more about our sponsors or becoming a member of the African American Marketing Association, visit aa-ma.org.